"Is that rifle just for show, old man?" One of the 5 masked men sneered, his voice a venomous tear in the hallowed silence of Arlington National Cemetery. They were a pack of wolves, young and lethal, circling what they saw as a relic. He was just one man, his hair salted with gray, standing sentinel before the tomb of the unknown soldier. Their hands were hidden, their mission clear, shatter a symbol. But they never imagined that the 60-year-old guard was Jason Statham, fulfilling a blood oath far from any movie set. Before I show you exactly how a Hollywood action sequence became terrifyingly real, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The crisp October air hung over the endless, silent rows of white marble headstones. The afternoon sun cast long, somber shadows across the hallowed grounds of Arlington, a place where history's weight was a palpable presence. At the tomb of the unknown soldier, a crowd of tourists and mourners stood in respectful quiet, their breaths misting in the cool air. They watched the lone sentinel, a figure of absolute discipline, his M14 rifle held with practiced perfection. Yet, today, the usual reverence was punctuated by whispers, a ripple of disbelief spreading through the onlookers. "Is that him?" a young woman whispered to her boyfriend, pointing her phone discreetly. "It looks just like Jason Statham." Her boyfriend zoomed in with his camera, his brow furrowed. "No way. The jawline, the shaved head, it's uncanny. But what would a movie star be doing here? It's just some guy who looks like him." This murmur was not isolated. Throughout the crowd, phones were being subtly raised, cameras trying to capture the face of the guard who bore an impossible resemblance to the global action icon. Most dismissed it as a bizarre coincidence, a doppelganger in the most unexpected of places. But a few weren't so sure. Among them was Walter Hayes, a 75-year-old Marine veteran of the Korean War. He stood ramrod straight, his old service cap tilted proudly. He wasn't looking at the guard's face. He was looking at his feet. He watched the impossibly precise 21-step count, the sharp turn, the perfect transfer of a rifle. To the untrained eye, it was flawless ceremony. To Walter, who had seen men prepare for battle his entire life, it was something more. He leaned over to Eleanor Davis, a former Army nurse, standing beside him. "See that? Eleanor," he muttered, his voice low. "That's not just parade ground training. Look at his posture. His shoulders are relaxed, but his legs are coiled. He's not just standing there. He's rooted to that spot, ready to move in any direction. I've only ever seen that stance on men who expect trouble." Eleanor, whose hands once worked with frantic precision in the triage tents of Vietnam, nodded slowly. Her gaze was fixed on the guard's eyes. They were focused on the horizon as protocol dictated, but she saw a flicker, an almost imperceptible scanning of the crowd that was anything but ceremonial. "He's not just on duty, Walter," she agreed softly. "He's hunting." They were both right. Underneath the pristine uniform, Jason Statham was anything but a ceremonial figure. This was not a role. This was a penance. A year-long, self-imposed mission to honor the man who had saved his life decades ago in the SAS, his commanding officer. That man's son, a young U.S. Marine whom Statham had loved like a nephew, now lay buried somewhere in these hallowed grounds. Through back channels and a debt owed to him by a 4-star general, Statham had arranged this. To stand guard, to offer the only tribute he knew how, the unwavering vigilance of a protector. The world saw a movie star. He was just a soldier, paying a debt. His senses, honed by years in the British Special Forces and sharpened by the hyper-awareness of Hollywood sets, were screaming at him. 5 men, standing apart from the crowd, near the chain barrier. They were trying to look casual, but their stillness was predatory. They weren't watching the ceremony. They were studying him. Their jackets, all identical black windbreakers, were zipped just high enough to conceal whatever they were carrying. They communicated not with words, but with subtle shifts in weight and near-invisible nods. Amateurs, he thought, a flicker of professional disdain crossing his mind. The extras on the set of his last film in Bulgaria had better tactical discipline, but the intent radiating from them was chillingly authentic. It was the cold, dead certainty of men who had come to kill and to die. He could almost smell the cheap cologne mingling with the scent of cordite from their last training session. This wasn't a movie. There would be no second takes. The safety of these civilians, this sacred ground, rested on him and him alone. And for the first time in years, Jason Statham felt the familiar, cold thrill of a real fight about to begin. Statham's mind operated on two distinct levels. On the surface, his body executed the ritual of the sentinel with a precision born from weeks of grueling, voluntary training. Every step, every click of his heels, every metallic snap of the rifle inspection was flawless, a tribute to the soldiers, known and unknown, who rested here. But beneath that stoic exterior, a different script was running. A cynical, professional assessment of the unfolding threat, narrated with the dry wit of a man who had seen it all, both on screen and off. Right then, 5 blokes try to look inconspicuous and failing spectacularly. He thought, his gaze fixed forward while his peripheral vision tracked every single micro-movement. The leader, the tall one with the scar peeking over his mask, thinks he's the villain from a Bond film. Overconfident, he'll make the first mistake. He watched as the man's eyes flickered towards a family with a young child, a classic tactic of intimidation and distraction. Predictable, Statham noted. He could practically hear the director in his head. Okay, Jason, in this scene, you're the stoic guardian. These lads are going to test you. Look impassive, but let the audience see the storm brewing in your eyes. The irony was thick enough to taste. For 20 years, he'd been paid millions to pretend to be this man. Now, he was doing it for free, and the stakes were infinitely higher. No stunt coordinators, no safety wires, no conveniently placed breakaway props. Just cold marble, real steel, and the very real possibility of failure. His focus narrowed on the other 4. One was fidgety, constantly adjusting the mask over his face. The nervous one, he's the weak link. He'll break first. Another 2 stood unnaturally still, their hands jammed in their pockets. The muscle. Trained, but not thinkers. They'll follow orders, nothing more. The 5th man, positioned slightly behind the others, was the most dangerous. He was calm, his eyes scanning not Statham, but the crowd, mapping escape routes and potential choke points. That one's the professional. He's the one I'll need to deal with first. In the subterranean control room beneath the Arlington Visitor Center, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Captain Margaret Lee, a sharp, no-nonsense officer, stared at a bank of monitors, her jaw tight. The facial recognition software had flagged the leader, Zafar, the moment he passed through the main gate. I have a positive ID, an analyst called out, his voice tense. Zafar Al-Falani, linked to the embassy bombing in Vienna 2 months ago. He's supposed to be in Syria. Lee's screen flashed red. A new alert popped up, this one from a behavioral analysis algorithm. Warning, coordinated hostile pattern detected. 5 subjects. Target, tomb of the unknown soldier. Give me a direct line to the asset, Lee commanded, her voice cutting through the rising tension. Now, ma'am, protocol is non-interference unless the asset is compromised. He's about to be, Lee snapped back. She pointed at the screen, where Zafar was beginning to move. Their formation is a classic pincer assault. This is planned. This is happening now. She slammed a large red button on her console. Initiate protocol, mechanic. I want every tactical team on this hill converging on the tomb in 90 seconds. And give me eyes on the asset's vitals. A small window appeared on her screen, displaying a single steady heartbeat. 72 beats per minute. The heart rate of a man resting. My God, the analyst whispered. He knows they're there. How is he so calm? Lee stared at the screen, at the face she'd only ever seen on movie posters. The file for mechanic was the thinnest and most redacted she'd ever encountered. It was mostly empty, save for a single line from the director of MI6. In the event of a hostile engagement, do not attempt to assist. Simply secure the perimeter and manage the aftermath. On the plaza, Zafar took a deliberate step forward, a handkerchief falling from his hand and landing just inside the chain barrier. A theatrical, almost cliché move. He looked directly at Statham, a mocking smirk playing on his lips, and spoke just loud enough for the wind to carry his words, a poisoned dart aimed at the heart of the ceremony. "Time's up, Grandpa." For the crowd, time seemed to fracture into 1,000 confusing shards. The attacker's casual, contemptuous step over the chain was the first crack. The synchronized movement of the other four was the second. Panic, a cold and sharp thing, began to prickle the air. A mother pulled her child close. A veteran's hand instinctively went to his side where a weapon no longer was. They were frozen, caught between disbelief and the dawning horror of a sacred space being violated. But for Jason Statham, time did not fracture. It compressed. The ambient sounds of the plaza, the rustling leaves, the distant traffic, the panicked whispers, faded into a dull roar. In their place, a state of hyperfocus he hadn't fully accessed since his last mission in the SAS took over. The world became a series of angles, trajectories, and points of impact. This was his stage. This was his craft. It wasn't a movie scene. It was a brutal, efficient calculus of violence. The script was simple. Neutralize the threat, protect the innocents, defend the tomb. Second 1 to 5, the leader. Zafar, the overconfident leader, sprang up from retrieving his handkerchief, a wicked-looking karambit knife flashing from his sleeve. He lunged, not to kill, but to maim, a showy, slashing arc aimed at Statham's weapon-holding arm. This was his first and last mistake. He expected his target to be a ceremonial soldier, slow and bound by protocol. He found a predator. Statham didn't retreat. He moved into the attack. In a motion too fluid to be tracked by the naked eye, he pivoted on his heel, using Zafar's own momentum against him. The heavy steel butt plate of the M14 rifle came around in a short, vicious arc, not hitting the knife, but the cluster of nerves in Zafar's wrist. The crack of bone was sickeningly loud in the sudden silence. The karambit flew from his nerveless fingers, skittering across the marble like a dead insect. Zafar screamed, a sound of shock more than pain, clutching his shattered arm. Second 6 to 12, the muscle. The two men on his flanks moved simultaneously. The one on the left grabbed for the rifle's barrel. The one from behind swung a collapsible baton at the base of Statham's skull. Statham didn't even look. He felt the shift in air pressure. As the man on the left's fingers brushed the wood of the rifle, Statham slammed the weapon down, trapping his hand against the stock, then drove a merciless elbow strike directly into the man's throat. The attacker crumpled, gagging and clawing at his crushed windpipe. Simultaneously, Statham ducked his head forward, letting the baton whistle past where his spine had been a millisecond before. He kept the attacker's momentum going, hooking a polished boot behind the man's knee and spinning him face first into the unforgiving marble. A sickening thud echoed as the man's face connected with the stone. Second 13 to 20, the professional. The fifth man, the calm one, had seen enough. He pulled a pistol from his jacket. He was the real threat. But as he began to raise the weapon, something impossible happened. A tourist, Walter, the old Marine, seeing the imminent lethal threat, roared and threw his heavy, metal-banded watch with all his might. It was a desperate, hopeless act, but it worked. The watch struck the gunman's hand just as he was acquiring his target. The shot went wide, cracking a marble tile high above the tomb. The crowd screamed, a wave of pure terror. That was all the opening Statham needed. He couldn't fire into the crowd, so he did the unthinkable. In one smooth motion, he ejected the rifle's magazine, caught it in his left hand, and without a moment's hesitation, threw its sidearm like a fastball pitcher. The solid block of steel and brass flew through the air 20 feet and struck the gunman squarely in the temple. The man dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, unconscious before he hit the ground. Second 21 to 30, the cleanup. The last man, the nervous one, lost his nerve completely. He turned to flee, to blend into the terrified crowd. Statham took 2 long strides. The M14 now held like a battering ram and drove the butt of the weapon into the man's lower back, just above the kidney. The man went down with a choked cry, his legs folding beneath him, 30 seconds, from the first step to the last man down. The plaza was littered with the groaning, broken bodies of 5 trained operatives. And in the center of it all stood Jason Statham. He calmly retrieved his magazine, slapped it back into the rifle with a resonant click, and returned to his post. His uniform was unruffled. His breathing was even. He brought the M14 back to its ceremonial position, his eyes once again fixed on the horizon as if nothing had happened. The only evidence of the battle was the sight of 5 men writhing in agony at his feet. The silence that followed was more profound than any that had come before. The crowd stared, their phones, some still recording, held limply in their hands. They hadn't just seen an attack. They had seen a movie become terrifyingly, brutally, and heroically real. The immediate aftermath was a tableau of surreal stillness. The 5 attackers were neutralized, scattered across the marble like broken chess pieces. The crowd was a silent, wide-eyed sea of faces, their brains struggling to process the violent reality that had just erupted and vanished. And at the center, the sentinel stood, a statue of deadly calm, the rhythmic ticking of a nearby clock tower suddenly audible in the vacuum of sound. Then, the tactical teams arrived. They didn't storm in with sirens blaring. They emerged from unseen doorways and side paths with a silent, lethal efficiency that was almost as startling as the fight itself. Clad in black tactical gear, they swarmed the plaza, their movements a well-oiled machine. One team secured the attackers, zip-tying wrists and checking for hidden weapons with impersonal precision. Another team, larger and more imposing, formed a human cordon, gently but firmly moving the crowd back, their faces impassive behind their helmets. Their leader, a man with captain's bars on his collar, approached Statham's post. He stopped a respectful 10 feet away, his eyes taking in the scene. He looked at the 5 down men, then at Statham, who hadn't moved a muscle. The captain simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done, then turned his attention to the most critical part of the mission, information control. "Sir, ma'am," a well-dressed man in a suit, clearly not a soldier, began addressing the stunned tourists. "My name is Deputy Director Evans. For reasons of national security, this area is now under military jurisdiction. We need to ask for your full cooperation." He was polite, but his tone brooked no argument. "We require you to surrender any and all digital recordings of the incident. This is not a request." Teams of agents, equipped with specialized tablets, moved through the crowd. They didn't confiscate phones, they were more sophisticated than that. They had people plug in their devices, and with a few taps, they located and permanently deleted any video or photo files from the last 10 minutes. Most people complied without a word, too shaken to argue. A few tried to protest, citing their rights, but a low-voiced, firm explanation about ongoing counterterrorism operations was usually enough to secure their compliance. In the chaos of the cleanup, Zafar, his wrist in a temporary splint, was being loaded into an unmarked van. His arrogant demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. As the door was about to slide shut, he looked past the agents, his eyes locking onto the still figure of Statham on the plaza. "You don't understand," he rasped to the agent securing him, his voice trembling. "That's not a soldier. That's him, the mechanic. He's not supposed to be real." The agent just stared at him blankly and slammed the door. Despite their efficiency, the agents couldn't get everything. A teenager, filming from a distance behind a thick marble column, had managed to stop his recording and slip his phone into his pocket before the agents reached him. Another clip, blurry and shaky, was captured by a security camera from a nearby building that wasn't part of Arlington's main network. Within hours, the official story was released. A group of brave, unnamed soldiers, including a particularly heroic sentinel, had thwarted a minor disturbance at the tomb. It was vague, professional, and utterly boring. But the internet told a different story. The 2 leaked clips, though of poor quality, went globally viral. The title was always the same: Jason Statham fights terrorists at Arlington. It became a sensation, a modern urban legend. News outlets debunked it. calling it a clever deepfake or a viral marketing stunt for an upcoming movie. Statham's own publicist issued a firm denial, stating that Mr. Statham was on a private retreat and hadn't been in Virginia. But for those who were there, and for the millions who watched the grainy footage, the legend felt more real than the official denial. The way he moved, the brutal efficiency, it was unmistakable. As the sun began to set, casting a fiery orange glow over the cemetery, Statham's shift ended. Another sentinel took his place, and the ritual continued, unbroken. Statham walked away, melting into the shadows of the colonnade. As he passed, he saw Walter, the old Marine, who had lingered. The old man didn't speak. He simply straightened his back and raised a hand in a slow, perfect salute. Jason Statham, the movie star, the secret soldier, stopped for a fraction of a second. He met the veteran's gaze, and in a gesture seen by no one else, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent conversation between two warriors, an acknowledgement of a duty done, a secret shared, and a legend born. This story isn't just about a movie star or a thwarted attack. It's about the thin line between the myths we consume and the realities we ignore. It reveals that the greatest protectors are often hidden in plain sight, their heroism cloaked in the mundane, their stories waiting for a moment of crisis to be told. The truth is often stranger and far more heroic than any script Hollywood could ever write. Have you ever witnessed something so unbelievable you questioned reality itself? What would you have done if you were in that crowd, phone in hand? Do you think there are real-life heroes like this among us? Their true identities shielded by their public personas, waiting for the call to action? If this story reminded you that heroes don't always wear capes, sometimes they wear a uniform and a famous face. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that blur the line between fiction and reality. Share this with someone who loves a good urban legend. We read every single comment. More stories about hidden heroes and secret lives are waiting on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with an unbelievable story about a librarian who is secretly a master spy.